Sky News is about to go high def, having made its investment in equipment, I think, a year or two ago, or its initial investment a year or two ago. So it's finally going high def, and I'm looking forward to it. Where does this leave other, if you like, second tier, not to minimise the importance of news, but it's not the usual sport and movies or even national history, discovery type programming? Where does this leave those other channels? Come to you, please, Carl.
I think eventually it is that choice from the operator as to what demand they're trying to fill. You know, is it the all content, all channels in HD type demand? At which point, even for the lower channels, the cost from an equipment standpoint will continue to fall to a point where there's ultimately no difference between the historical SD costs of equipment and production versus the HD costs. As Bob had already touched on, there's a tangible benefit to the HD production side, even with ultimately SD broadcast quality today, and that continues. And eventually, with continuing improvements in compression performance and everything else, bit rates will continue to drop. I mean, in comparison to 10 years ago or 15 years ago when SD-MPEG-2 started, we're already running high definition channels at lower bit rates now than MPEG-2 SD was 15 years ago, and that's only going to continue to drop in that respect. So ultimately, even for the sort of niche, lower popularity type channels, it will become the all channels in HD fulfillment for anyone who's got the 30-inch, 60-inch, 40-inch screen. It will eventually happen, but timescale question.
I mean, not to use MTV as an example. I mean, who are the sort of people that you're now putting kit in for in that area? Not just music, but non-premium, non-top level premium channels.
Today, it's the people who are rolling out high definition today are still in the national broadcast terrestrial operators. Pay TV or popular advertising funded content today. The other side of the rollout that we do see is in the kind of news gathering, event coverage area as well. So as you touched on the move of Sky News to a HD format. Well, ultimately that means that all of the rest of the chain of acquiring content from live events and news events, getting that content back to the studio also has to sort of have made that change over to HD. So we see a lot more transition in that area.
And you think that is Sky News plus the American counterparts, they are going to drive a shift to high def down the capture line, from the lens through the Globecasts and through the Archivas?
Very much. It's the if anything, the TV screen in the home is the last thing in the chain that eventually sees that move. We're seeing right at the event capture and start of the whole production chain that move towards P50, P60, 1080p 50/60 formats over the next year or two. You're already seeing production and cameras and everything else start to gear up for that format, and that becomes the highest pinnacle of resolution and quality at the very start of the whole content capture and flow chain. And then as we goes through studios to studios and eventually becomes the home format, you'll see the bit rate and resolution and everything else drop. But eventually, as the whole of the rest of that content chain has become more HD ready and HD gets closer and closer to the edge of the transmission chain, then eventually it reaches the home, even for the non-mass popularity channels.
Ian, what are you sensing with your client contacts?
Well, I think the Sky move is particularly interesting because I think what it recognises is it's a major broadcaster taking the last bastion of SD, which news was predominantly SD, up-converted in early American HD channels. And I think Sky quite rightly raised the bar because customers do actually notice the difference between content chopping and changing.
I mean, this audience of one, of course, it's easy for me to spend somebody else's money, but I couldn't understand why the BBC and our public broadcasters didn't make a rapid adoption of high definition in current affairs. Not necessarily news, because news is ingesting a lot of material that comes from 101 sources, but in terms of their own talking heads type programs, you know, 2-camera, 3-camera setup will give you an hour of high definition material, or does it not matter? I mean, is that the view that?
Well, I think the Sky move's particularly interesting because, I mean, you know, a lot of their success has been premium content, sports content, and I think one of the underlying things is it's about capability existing, and you know, there's always been a bottleneck over satellite before, and I think that what we're seeing now is that the introduction of HD services has become easier because more stadia have become fibred.
Yes.
So that, you know, that's laid up a large swathes of satellite news gathering trucks because basically most of the main stadia are fibred. Your point about anchor people, you know, there is no excuse really. You can move from SD to HD, so that there does exist a question there. But I mean, I think that now with S2 and fibre actually coming, bandwidth is becoming more ubiquitous. It's easier to sort of have a complete chain of HD, and I think that, you know, sort of the more cutting edge broadcasters will embrace it earlier. The same is true, of course, in the US, where a lot of broadcasters, there's a big push now. News can be a little bit forgiving in that, you know, sort of a poor quality picture can be equated to the immediacy of the news and, you know, getting on there. But the underlying feedback from customers is they want a consistent quality across all programming.